Hi, if you are here today, I imagine it's because you want help with your fretting hand technique. And if that's the case, you've come to exactly the right place. All right, so let's get started. So when I say fretting hand technique, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the hand that you use to fret chords or notes on your guitar fretboard, whether that be your left or your right hand. And then my next question is, why is it important that the technique of this hand be good? Well, I can think of two reasons. The first one being that if you have incorrect technique, you will limit the movement of your fretting hand, which means that you might have to overextend yourself. You might have to push harder than you normally would, which means you can't play with ease, and ultimately you can't play with speed. And then the second reason is a very important one. If you have incorrect technique, this will result in injury in your tendons, your muscles, the nerves, your fingers, the bones, whatever it looks like, which means in decades to come, as you want to play guitar, you won't be able to because of the pain that you struggle with. So I want to help you with an exercise. I'm going to get you to do something. Let's look at how your wrist moves naturally. So go ahead and place your fretting hand in this kind of position, just relaxed. Your wrist is straight, your fingers are just relaxed. Can you see how naturally my fingers start to curl up? Now I can extend my fingers. That would require some effort. Some muscles are now having to work to get my fingers to extend. So if I relax my hand, then my hand is curling. Now what happens if I take my wrist and I bend it even further down? My fingers start to curl even more. And if I bend it the other way, can you see my fingers start to go straight? My fingers go straight, which means there's something happening in the muscles to cause my fingers to go straight. Now, think about it. When I'm playing guitar with my wrist like this, my fingers naturally are straight. I have to then fight the natural tendency of my fingers and bend them, which means I'm engaging muscles that I wouldn't normally have to engage. And that can result in my arm becoming tired before it should be. So I want to try and keep my wrist straight so that there's that natural there. Now, someone might ask, well, okay, Daryl, if you keep your wrist down like that, your fingers curl even more. Well, then I need to get you to do this. How about you take it from this natural position, move it down, force your wrist down, and immediately you start to feel tension. Where's that tension? Right here in your wrist. Tension's not good. Say it with me. Tension is not good. If I take my wrist and move it the exact opposite way, where's the tension now? It's right here through the arm. Why is tension an issue? Well, think about it. A little bit of tension can't be that bad for you. But if we keep it in context of how many hours we're going to be playing through our lifetime, that little bit of tension is going to create some damage. And that's why I say that it is so important that you keep your wrist as straight as possible. Now, I say as possible because there are some cases where you can't avoid bending your wrist, and I'm going to show you those two cases in a moment. Before I do, let's talk about the anatomy of your wrist. Your wrist is possibly one of the most narrow parts of your body. And inside of your wrist, you have what's called the carpal tunnel, which is, it houses a nerve that is called the median nerve. And because of that nerve, you can feel things when you touch them. Think about it. Your hand is possibly the most used item on your body that you touch your environment with, that you feel your environment with. So that nerve is very important. Now, if you play guitar and bend your wrist, you are squeezing that nerve. And over time, if you squeeze that nerve too much, you can develop what's called carpal tunnel syndrome, which is not good. That's where you start having these tingling feelings in your fingers. Your fingers move involuntarily. They don't move when you want them to move. It's not a good thing. And so that's why you want to keep your wrist straight. Now, to help you with those two times where your wrist can be bent, I need to pick up the guitar. The first example of where you would be bending your wrist as you play is when you play a bar chord. Now, remember with the exercise earlier, when we bent our wrist up, our fingers naturally went straight. And as you play a bar chord, you need a straight finger. That's your first finger. So think about it this way. As you play a bar chord, can you see my wrist is slightly bent this way? It's not as exaggerated as that, but it is bent slightly. The other time that you'll bend your wrist is if you play what's called a Hendrix chord, or if you have your thumb over the top to fret a string. In that case, you need to have the pad of your hand up against the fretboard. And to do that with very little tension is to have your wrist bent that way. Now, you can see that I haven't bent my wrist exaggerated. It's not intensely bent because I'm protecting that median nerve. But in these two cases, I do need to bend my wrist slightly. Now that you have your wrist in the correct position, you'll find that this next aspect of your fretting hand technique is easier to achieve. And now I'm going to be talking about making sure that your palm is parallel to the fretboard of your guitar. Now, the reason that we do that is so that we have greater range of movement. We talked about the fact that technique will help you with making sure you don't injure yourself and making sure that you have the correct range of movements in your hands. Now think about it. If I play guitar like this where my hand is not parallel but to an angle, as soon as I try and use my third finger, my fourth finger is coming up with it. Now the reason that is because my third and fourth fingers, the nerves that run to these fingers are intertwined, and you probably know with your own hand that your third and fourth fingers are difficult to move independently of each other. So when I move my third finger and my hand is in this position, I'm fighting with my fourth finger. I will eventually feel some tension over here. Now, if you're playing a lot of fast pieces, you'll find that that tension results in injury ultimately. So what's the solution? Keep your hand parallel to the fretboard of the guitar, and that way when you fret with your third finger, your fourth finger is naturally just curling with it, but not fighting the third finger. And this will mean you can play longer. Now, the next aspect of your guitar fretting hand technique will be how your fingers fret the strings. So what you want to do is you want to use the very tip of your fingers to push the string down. You don't want to use the pad of your fingers. That is where the fingerprint is, because that's just awkward. You want to use the thinnest part of your finger because the strings are quite close to each other. And when you use a thin part of your finger to fret the string down, there's very little chance of you touching the other strings. Now, I've been blessed with fingers that are long and bony and slender, which in some cases isn't great, but for playing guitar, it's amazing. And I've also worked with some people who have chubbier fingers, and they've had to make some adjustments when they play guitar. If you find that you have that situation with your playing, let us know in the comments below what you've done to make your guitar playing easier, because I do understand that fretting strings can be difficult. For example, with the open A chord, people with larger fingers can't fit all three fingers in one fret over three strings. But either way, I think passion has produced, people have just pushed as hard as they can to make playing guitar possible for them. So if you get all of these things right, this is what your playing should look like. As you keep your hand parallel to the guitar neck and your wrist straight, and you're playing loosely. Can you see how loose I'm playing? You want to play loose because this will help you to play longer over time. If you get tired while you're playing, this means you can't play that long. And if you are forcing yourself, if you're having to work your muscles really hard to play, that means also that you are creating tension. And remember, tension's bad. Tension will result in injury. So keep this in mind and aim for yourself to have this kind of look as you play. Something else that's helped me to understand just how loose I need to be is legato, which is where you have to play these pieces really quickly on your guitar fretboard. And what happens is when you're tense, when there's tension in your hand gets really tight, which means you need to stop and rest because you're hurting yourself. And that's not cool when you want to get a certain amount of speed. You're having to play for a few minutes and then stop, play for a few minutes and then stop. So consider some of these great guitarists like Joe Satriani, Steve Vai. They play these runs on the guitar. They sometimes play in a concert for an hour. It's amazing how long they can go for. Now, clearly their fingers are trained for it, but consider how loose they must be playing for them to be able to play that long and still have healthy hands at the age of 60. It's amazing. So you want to be as loose as possible. Something else that will also help is if your strings are pretty close to the fretboard. Think about it. The further your strings are away from the fretboard, the further you're having to push them down, which could result in tension. I mean, with the right training, you may not have to. You could still stay loose. I'm not saying that your strings always have to be close to the fretboard. Not every style of music requires that. But just so that you know, if you're trying to play these legato runs with strings that are far from the fretboard, you're making your fingers work just that bit more. Now, a Christian song that I know really highlights this idea of legato for me is the song This Love by Planet Shakers. Now, I've played that song. I've done a cover of the guitar solo, and I'm providing the link here at the top of the screen. Have a look at that for an idea of what all these things that I've told you about, this fretting hand technique is all about, and see if you can spot it in the playing, and why not try and play the song yourself.